I'm sure all of you are aware, the president signed the OBBA over the weekend, and while we are still conducting a full analysis, we want to briefly just talk to you about some of the potential implications of this piece of legislation. Economists and analysts all agree that this bill essentially represents the largest upward transfer of wealth in our nation's history. This bill literally takes from the poor to give to the rich. You often hear me quote Matthew 6:21, where your heart is, there your treasure will be also. And that Jesus the Christ, my Lord and Savior, follow the tenets that when you do for the least of these, you do unto me. This is the opposite of what my faith requires and what my faith calls for. And the primary way in which, this bill has found so-called savings, if you can even call them that, is through cutting health care for poor and working people. This bill is the deepest rollback of Medicaid in the history of our country. Our state could lose almost $50 billion over the next decade in Medicaid cuts alone. Roughly 1 million Chicagoans rely on Medicaid, half of which are children. On top of these cuts to health care, we will see devastating cuts to food programs. At a time in which 1 in 5 households in Chicago are food insecure, these cuts will cause even more hardship for those most in need. We have roughly 600,000 Chicagoans who rely on SNAP, and this bill is a direct assault on their ability to survive. I want to be clear. When we talk about community safety, it's no secret that poverty is a major driving factor in crime and violence. So these cuts not only continue to exacerbate neighborhoods that are riddled in poverty, this will put America at risk, particularly as we work to build public safety as a reality for people across this country. We are also seeing dramatic cuts to public education. Changes to the student loan programs will make the dream of attending college unattainable for poor and working families and will drive up the cost for middle-class students. They've also snuck in another scam voucher program which subsidizes private education for wealthy parents. The so-called qualified elementary and secondary education scholarship could cost up to $51 billion a year. That's more than the federal government invests in public education for students with disabilities and high poverty schools combined. This is on top of the Trump administration freezing nearly $7 billion in federal education funding that had been allocated by Congress primarily to support after-school programs. And so what do all these cuts pay for? There are two main things. First, it's the largest upward transfer of wealth in our nation's history. Cutting food, healthcare, and education for poor and working Americans is how they are paying for a $1 trillion tax cut for the ultra-rich. This is an abomination. This is sinful. It's unholy. But it reminds me of a quote by the Supreme Court Justice Brandeis when he said, "We must make our choice. We may have a democracy, or we may have wealth concentrated in the hands of a few, but we cannot have both." This bill is a fundamental attack on our democracy and our way of life. The other things and all the other cuts pay is for a massive increase in the masked, secret police that are terrorizing our communities. ICE. ICE will now have a larger budget than all but 15 of the world's militaries. Its 4-year total is more than every military except for the United States and China. This is a direct assault on the civil liberties of all Americans and will fundamentally undermine our rights. As our budget and finance team continue to analyze the impacts of this bill, we will provide you with more updates on the impacts on Chicagoans and how we are going to fight back to protect our people.